Taking a look at using native boot and being able to boot directly off of a VHD file, which you could use in virtualization as a virtual machine, in virtual PC, or things like VMware, but you can also boot into it natively using BCDedit from the boot menu. And my personal preference is to just split a drive into multiple partitions. I usually do like Snow Leopard and Linux and Windows 7 and sometimes 2008 on a laptop or a desktop, and I just set up multiple partitions that way. For example, so let's take a look at how Grub2 works with the boot menu and multiple operating systems, and we'll just boot into each one real quick and test them out. So I'm going to go into Ubuntu. Okay, and the next one we want to test is Windows 7. And finally, let's try Snow Leopard on our Hackintosh. But if for one reason or another multiple partitions are not your thing, you can use only one partition with multiple VHD files in native boot. But if you don't want to do that, you can also use native boot, and at least with like Windows operating systems and products. That way you could have, if you wanted, multiple VHD files, large VHD files with different operating systems all on the same partition, and you could still add entries to your boot menu with the BCDedit tool. The only caveat or the downside to that is a lot of times your performance can be degraded when you're booting from a compressed image file, versus just a standard partition. So I guess it's up to the individual user, whatever your preference is, whether you like to multi-partition your drive for multi-boots or whether you would like to use native boot and VHD files. But let's look at look and see how you would implement native boot on a Windows system. First, we have to create a VHD file. Here's how we do it graphically. So I'm going to right-click on Computer and select Manage. And under Computer Management, I'm going to click on Disk Management. This is the tool we want to access. I'm going to shrink this down a little bit, try to get this up where you guys can see it. I'm going to pull that down a little bit over there and pull this up some over here. There you go. Alright, so you can see that these are the 4 physical drives that I have attached to the main board on this system. Okay, and these are multiple partitions. In this case, Windows, there's a data partition. This is a Linux Ubuntu partition and a swap file partition, and these are all just data drives here, just NTFS data drives. But what I want to do is, there's a tool. If you click on Action, notice you can create a VHD file or attach a VHD file that's already been created. And this is the same type of VHD file that, like I said, you could use with a virtual PC if you're implementing virtualization, which is a tool like VMware. I use VMware a lot. So to create it, I would click Create VHD, and for the location, I'm going to choose this directory right here, and I'm going to call this one native boot example. Alright, this will be our native boot example. I can set the size in megabytes, so 20,000 megabytes would be like 20 gig. Now you can pick dynamically expanding, in which case it would consume less disk space and would inflate dynamically as you installed programs and needed more size. So that's a good option for saving hard drive space. But fixed size is recommended, which means that it'll make a whatever chunk, in this case a 20 gigabyte size chunk, and that's just the size that it remains, whether you fill it up or not. Now that does waste more physical hard drive space, but it will also give you more performance and more compatibility with things when you are implementing, say, native boot or using VHD files to boot off of. So in this case, I'm going to choose fixed size and OK. Notice it tells us, here, creating virtual disk. Move my mouse around, And it's given us a sort of a percentage or a progress bar down here at the bottom of disk management. So you see like the little blue progress bar. While it's doing that, I'm going to open my computer and go here. This is the drive I created it on. And just notice that here's my native boot example. Alright, so it's a it's a ginormous 20 gigabyte file, 19.5 gigs, so 20 gig, or 20,000 megabytes. But right now it's being formatted and created, that virtual disk. And 99%, 100. Notice when it's done, it detects it as a drive, almost like you had plugged in a removable USB drive or something. So here it is, and it's unallocated, but it's been created. Notice that see a little down red arrow, so I'd have to initialize the disk and bring it online. And I could attach a VHD. I just created one, or I could detach it and then reattach it if I wanted to. So if I said detach VHD, I could choose delete the virtual hard disk file after removing disk. I'm not going to say that. I'm just going to say OK. So that detaches it almost like, again, like I were plugging and unplugging a removable USB drive. Alright, so let's go take a look at the file size. And again, if I come over here, remember what we called it, native boot example. So here's our 20 gigabyte native boot example VHD file right there. And if I had multiple drive files and I wanted to attach them and make them accessible, I could again go to action and I could say attach VHD. And I could come over here and here's native boot example.vhd, which is what I want to attach. Notice I could choose the option to make it read only. No, I don't want that. I want it to be writable. But I could do that if I needed that, for security precautions or something. So then I'd say OK. And the neat thing is, I can use this VHD file, like I said, in a virtual machine, in virtual PC, or I can use it as a hard drive right on my system. So if I were to right click, notice that I can bring up properties for it, just like I could a physical volume. And if I go over here and I initialize the disk, notice I can choose MBR or GPT just like I could with an actual disk. I'll choose MBR. It's online, and now I can create a new simple volume just like a physical disk, and I can format it. So if I wanted to, I could give it a drive letter, and I'll call it vert data. Choose NTFS. Okay. And just like you would, a physical hard drive, you can format your VHD file that you've created with Windows. Now it exists as a primary partition. And so now if I open up my computer, notice there it is. There's a 20 gigabyte. So it appears like a physical drive. It's mounted and attached that way, but really it's a VHD file, a virtual hard drive that I could, if I wanted to, I could bring this in and use it in a virtual PC. Pretty cool, huh? And again, here's how it looks in disk management as a physical disk, even though it's a VHD file. And here's how it would also look. Now let's create a VHD file using the command prompt and diskpart. Now we're going to do from the command prompt what we did graphically. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to run a command prompt with administrator privileges. So I'll right click and say run as administrator. And I'm just going to recurse back a couple of directories and clear the screen so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to launch the diskpart command with just the command diskpart. And I want to create a vdisk file. And where do I want to create it? In this case, I have 50 gigabytes of free space on my D drive. So I'm going to place this on the D drive, so d:\\. And we'll call it what we did before in the previous example, native boot example VHD. So that's the path, location, and name of the file. I want to set the maximum size. And that's just going to be 20,000 megabytes, 20,000 leagues under the sea, or 20 gig. And the type is going to be fixed. And that's not a dash, that's, there you go. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, and then when this part is done, it'll let me know, and then all we'll need to do is select the file after it's been created, attach it. We'll want to create a primary partition on it, so we'll partition it. We'll assign a drive loader to it, and then we'll format it with the NTFS file system. So all the things we did graphically, but this time we're doing them from the command prompt. Alright, and now diskpart successfully created the virtual disk file. So now that the disk file has been created, I'm going to want to select it. And so the next command is going to be select, and my VHD file is going to be vdisk, and I just want to specify the file. So file is the one we just created with the path on my D drive, and it was native boot example.vhd. Alright, so our native boot example virtual hard drive file. So diskpart successfully selected the virtual disk file, so it's been created and it's been selected, and now I want to attach it. And this command, just like we did graphically in disk management, it's like plugging in or unplugging a USB drive. You'll even hear the little sound, little Windows thing come on. So I'm going to go ahead and attach it. I'm going to say attach vdisk, the one that is currently selected. You hear that, and now that's completed. It's been attached. Now, just like any new hard drive, it doesn't have a partition yet. There's no volume, no partition, and there's no file system on it. So we need to create that. And whereas we did it graphically before, now we're using the command prompt. So the first thing I'm going to do now that it's attached and that it's been created and selected is I'm going to create a primary partition. And let's just create, and you can specify the type. So it's going to be primary. So create partition primary. And now I'm going to go ahead and give it a letter, a drive letter. I'm going to do assign letter equals X. Okay. And in this case, it's been assigned the drive letter X. Alright, you assign a drive letter or mount point. And with this, now I'm going to go ahead and format it. And I'll choose quick formatting. And I'm going to, this will be NTFS, and I'm going to select the label. I'm going to call it NAT boot EXP. Or how about VHD? How about that? Alright, so native boot VHD, I guess, is what we can label it. And now it's just going to proceed to do a quick format. Okay, and now it's all set, and I can exit. So I'm leaving disk partition manager. And you can just ignore this. This pops up, but I did it with the command prompt. So you can just click cancel. There's no point in redoing it. But notice that, if I go over here, here's X. There's native boot VHD. Now it looks like it's a physical drive or like a USB drive I plugged in, but again, that's actually a VHD file. Alright, so it's a virtual hard drive file. So it's mounted as X, but it's really a file, a fixed file that's created on D. So if I come down here, native boot, here's the 20, let me pull this out so you can see the size of it. Here's the 20 gigabyte file that we created from the command prompt here, but here it works just like a hard drive, and I can copy and save files to it and things. And if I wanted to detach it, I could simply use I'd run diskpart again, I'd select the disk with select vdisk, and then instead of attach vdisk, I'd use the command detach vdisk. Okay? Or again, we could do it graphically. If we go here to manage, and if I were to select disk management and come down here, notice again, graphically I have the option to detach the VHD. Either way, so this step being done, the next thing we want to do is actually use ImageX, and we're going to take a Windows image file and put it on that partition. Now we've made it to our second major step. So now that you have a newly formatted VHD file, transfer a Windows image file, that's the .wim file, to it with the tool ImageX.exe from the AIK. Now that we've created a VHD file, either graphically via disk management or from the command prompt, we now need to take a Windows image file and apply it to that the VHD file that we created to make it available for native boot. And you have several options. You can download a Windows PowerShell script, which I downloaded. And if we go here, here's the PowerShell script, and you can simply download that from Microsoft. I think I put a shortcut in here, so I'll take you to the web page. Let's see, there's a shortcut. Alright, so if you go to this page here, or just Google, in this case you want to get the Windows Image PowerShell script, that, if you download it, and here's the documentation on it, can assist you in creating or applying a Windows image file to a VHD file. So that is one method, but also built right into the if you have the automated installation kit, which I already have installed, and that's a free download. It's about a 1.7 gigabyte ISO you can download from Microsoft. But the Windows 7 AIK, or automated installation kit, has a tool in it called ImageX, which is an imaging tool, kind of like Ghost or Clonezilla. And the only thing is, if you're using a custom image, you want to make sure that you sysprep it, because you need to generalize it. So so you want to use the /generalize option, and you want to get the setup wizard to run the first time. So I would use the OOBE option. And the reason is because whatever hardware might have existed on the image, the system where you created the image, when you take a VHD file and mount it and boot into it with native boot, it's going to be in a different environment. Right, so different settings, different hardware, things like that. So you want to be able to run the setup utilities and things and reconfigure it as necessary. So I would probably, certainly want to run sysprep on the image. Now, if you're going to use the default Windows image file that's on the Windows 7 installation disk, of course you don't have to worry about that because you have to run setup anyway. And so that's what I'm going to do. But just be aware that if you're creating a custom image, like we've done in previous examples, we're using like Aphrodite and different computers, just with the AIK, then you're going to need to make sure that you run sysprep first. So not necessary now, because I'm just using the default install.wim image on the Windows 7 installation DVD. So anyway, here's the Windows AIK, and you'll need to get into by default program files, Windows AIK tools, PE tools. But when you install the AIK, it puts a little shortcut to the correct section of the command prompt, and you just need to make sure you open that with administrator privileges. So I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say run as administrator. And when I do that, notice it just opens me right up to the right place. And again, let me make this more easily visible for you. So now that I'm in the right place, the tool that I need is ImageX. Okay, and here are some of my basic tools, and here's just sort of the command line syntax for ImageX here. So what I need to do is basically find my Windows image file on the default installation DVD for this example. Not doing a custom image, just doing the default. So here I have a Windows 7 DVD, and if I go into the sources folder, let me go over to the filter here, and I'll just *1. Okay, but this 2 gigabyte image here, the install.wim file, that's the image that I need to apply in this example. Alright, so install.wim, and notice that's going to be I, and in sources, and then install.wim. Alright, so I just need to know what I want to image and where I want to image it to. And then of course, where I want to image it to, my mounted VHD file is right here. Alright, it's mounted as X. So that's I and that's X. Maybe I'll just leave that open there. So the syntax for the command would be ImageX, and I'm going to do apply, and then in this case I want to specify the location of where that install WIM file is, so it's going to be I, and in a subdirectory called sources, and then install.wim. Alright, so install.wim, and then I'm going to specify the location here, so I'm just going to say X and do a / right there. Okay, so that'll be like a / right there. And now ImageX is going to work its magic, and it will take that Windows image file and apply it to the VHD file. Alright, and we're at 100% now, successfully applied image. And so again, if I open up Explorer here, notice now that on this hard drive, this is the actual contents of the image. Like if I were to open this image off of the DVD, this is the image here that we would see. So that's sort of the default image, Windows image there. And so we've created the VHD file, and now we've used ImageX. If you need to download and install the AIK, we've used ImageX, or you can use the PowerShell script, whatever your preference is. So far we've created the VHD file, and then we used ImageX to image, copy a Windows image to the drive, and now we just need to detach it. And there's several ways we could do that. I could right click on my computer, feel like using the GUI, and we could go to disk management, and go to disk management here. If I come down here, notice here is the file. And if I wanted to, I could right click over here on the little gray square, and I could say detach VHD. And I could detach it that way. It's one way to leave your lever. But we have this beautiful command prompt open here, and so I'm just going to recurse out to the root directory here. So I'm going to type the command diskpart. And need to specify the virtual hard drive, so the vdisk file. And remember that was on the D partition. We called it native boot example.vhd. And so in this case we successfully selected the virtual disk file, and now I just want to detach it. So detach vdisk. You hear the little sound there, and so it's like unplugging a USB drive, and in this case we detached it, and then I can simply exit out of the command. Alright, and I'll exit the command prompt. When I do this, now I have, if I go here, now I have a portable VHD file with that Windows image on it now, and I can take that and move that around. And so the next step will be to set up the Windows boot menu, and I can move it to any system where I want to apply it in a multi-boot type configuration, and we'll use native boot, and we'll use the BCD store and BCD edit tool to make an entry so that we can boot into it. Now I need to copy the image to the system where we want to use it, and use the BCD edit.exe tool to add it to the Windows 7 boot menu. We're on another host now, Aphrodite. We were on Frankenstein. Remember on Frankenstein we created a 20 gigabyte VHD file, and then we used the AIK and ImageX to image the default Windows installation file to it. Then we detached it, and I've copied it over to Aphrodite, and I've put it on the E drive, our partition here on this system. So I'm going to need a command prompt with administrative privileges. So I'm going to right click and run as administrator. And I'm just doing sort of white text, or black text or black foreground on a white background here. And let me go to the root directory and clear the screen. But you could modify it, to whatever colors you like. I think for this tutorial, probably that's the best color. I don't know. So BCD edit, if I just type it by itself, will give me a listing of my boot entries, and you can see that this is just sort of a plain vanilla default Windows 7 installation here. What I need to do is I want to utilize, basically want to copy and utilize my boot entry, and I can use that to make another additional entry to boot from the VHD file. Now before I do this, before you modify your boot menu or boot structure, it's a good idea to always back things up. So I would use BCD edit and export to back it up, and C and BCD data store. I guess that was kind of wordy, but oh well. Alright, so I backed it up. Now it's in a file called bcd underscore data store underscore backup. Let me clear the screen. The next thing I want to do is copy the default entry, and again, like I said, we're going to use it to build the entry. Oops, left off the D there. BCD edit. We'll use it to build the entry for the menu entry where we're going to boot off the VHD file. So I'm going to select the copy option, and I can just use default in the curly braces there, and I'm going to specify in this case the D option and the description, or what I want to appear in the menu, whatever I want to call it. I'm just going to call this boot from VHD file Windows 7. Right, that'll be the title that will appear in the menu. Now when I do this, notice it returns a globally unique identifier, or GUID, and I'm going to need that for the next few commands. So I could try to type that out, but the easiest thing to do is to copy it to the clipboard. So I'm going to right click and select mark. Then I'm going to drag my mouse, and highlight this chunk of text right here, and right click again, which copies it to the clipboard. Then I'm ready for the next few commands, bcd edit and set, because we need to set some options. And rather than type, I'm just going to paste that GUID, or globally unique identifier, in there, and I need device and VHD, so I'm going to specify a device, in this instance a virtual hard drive, equals, and in the square brackets it's going to be the drive letter. So nope, it's not a semicolon, but so E colon, and close that in the, boy, I'm telling you, close it in the square brackets, and then I want a backslash, and remember it was native boot example.vhd was the actual name of the file. And I wish I could stretch that a little bit more, but so anyway, notice bcd edit, set the globally unique identifier, device VHD equals the partition and the drive where you have the VHD file that you want to mount and make available in the boot menu for native boot, and then in this case the name of the file, native boot VHD. Alright, an operation completed successfully. So I want to do the next command, which is similar, bcd edit, and I'm going to use the set option, and I have to specify the globally unique identifier. It's still on the clipboard, so I'm going to right click and say copy and paste, and this time instead of device it's OS device and VHD equals, and the square brackets again, and backslash and native boot example.vhd, native boot example.vhd. Alright, and operation completed successfully. Okay, so in this example, let me go ahead and clear the screen, and now notice that on my boot menu this is available. Okay, so here I'm just booting to normal Windows 7, and you can see the settings here. It's just a C partition, and where my BCD data store and boot files are located. However, over here, the one that I copied, it's been modified so that it will say boot from VHD file Windows 7, and it uses a virtual hard drive, and this is where to find it, E native boot example VHD, and in this case the device is VHD native boot example VHD. Okay, so basically I'm not really doing anything different than if I just created multiple partitions. And again, my personal preference, guys, I'm not a big fan of this native boot. I sometimes you take a performance hit when you run things out of a VHD file. And maybe it depends on the hardware and the combination of your operating systems and whatnot. And also you can take a compatibility hit. I like to use operating systems that aren't always friendly or don't always play nice with VHD files. But either way, it's available as an option. If you wanted to just use a single partition or a removable drive or something and just have these VHD files with different operating systems, you could add them in this way, and they would be available via multi-boot. In case you were wondering, here's how our new Windows 7 boot menu looks now. And this is a screenshot of what my boot menu now looks like. So again, there's my normal Windows 7 on the normal partition, and then here is the entry that I added to boot into the VHD file.